Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Good to see you. Hi, producer Bev. Hi, William. Really excited about today's guest. I think I say that every time, but I mean it this time. And I'm excited for you to meet our guest. So, as you know, the point of the show is to kind of pull back the veil and give you, the audience, insight into HR and talent acquisition and the people that are kind of behind the scenes. And this is that. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show Sandi.
Hi.
Yay.
Nice to see you.
Okay, so Sandi, I talk too much, and rather than me tell everybody how cool and great and smart you are, would you mind just taking a couple of minutes and at a high level, just introducing yourself to the audience?
Okay. My name's Sandi. I've been in talent since my first job. Actually, in high school, I ran the job bank for our small town, and I used to get jobs for kids mowing lawns and cleaning out gutters and shoveling snow back east. And moved to the Bay Area in 2000, chasing the dot-com boom, which became a bust shortly after, but stayed. And love the career. I've never wanted to do anything else from the first day of my first job, which was June of 1988, actually. So I'm a long timer. And now run the talent organization at a company called Zscaler in San Jose. And so I'm really excited I started during COVID. And so it's been a really interesting 10 months.
Okay, thank you. So listen, we kind of have I wouldn't call it a running joke, but we say, hey, no one says when I grow up, and no one has a degree in talent acquisition. And you're one of the, first of all, good for you, because my whole thing is, are you good at it? Do you enjoy it? Can you get paid? And if you're good at it and you enjoy it, you're going to get paid. And the fact that you enjoy it and you've been doing it so long is remarkable. So was there ever any, I mean, you said you knew you wanted to do it. So was there ever any?
Yeah, when you said it earlier, I kind of chuckled because I knew I was going to be in sales when I was younger. I was just someone who was good at, I could talk my teachers into anything. I could manipulate my parents, and I was pretty good at sales. I'm the youngest. And I was in college, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And a family friend, my sophomore year in college, offered me a job at her agency, which was called Jobs Are Us, funny enough. And they did secretarial back then. It was called secretarial. And I used to call companies for job orders all summer, $5 an hour. I would just make phone calls, and I was really good at it. And it's funny, my best friend did it that summer as well and did not do as well. But she runs a restaurant. She's a caterer. She's somebody who's out in front, and her passion was not to be on the phone. And for me, I was natural at it. And so from then on, I thought, well, this is the career I want. And when I was ready to get a full-time job, I was 21. I sounded like Minnie Mouse. It was horrible. And I interviewed at a bunch of agencies. And I will say, and I know we talk about giving advice, and this is probably the first tidbit, is it was one of the biggest agencies. I'm from back in Connecticut. And the partner in the firm kept saying no to me, but I kept calling her because the way she said no was to say, well, call me in a month, call me in a couple of weeks, let me see. And I always followed up. And when I got hired, finally, she was like, well, you were so tenacious, I figured I'd give you a shot. And the rest was history. I stayed there over 3 years. The firm, it was back in the 90s bust, closed shop, but I never looked back. So I pursued being a recruiter, and I was a headhunter on commission for 8 years before I came inside.
Wow, that's not insignificant. And kudos to you, because I mean, recruiting is sales.
Right.
Let's be honest. But it's it's interesting because most people, including me, have a really hard. I mean, tenacity will serve you well in any endeavor, but most certainly recruiting. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so what do you think, what are some of the rudimentary skills or qualities, tenacity notwithstanding, that make a successful talent acquisition leader?
A leader or
Practitioner, what are
well,
some
I
things
mean, I
that,
think is at first you have to be a great recruiter. I don't think you can run talent if you don't have a solid background in recruiting. Every company, I contracted at Google back in 2003 and 4, and they thought anyone but a recruiter can run recruiting. And I've been many places where they think an engineer would do better. I remember interviewing at a company that's public now who wanted to hire an engineering leader to run recruiting. And so I would say first, be a great recruiter. Just have the foundational understanding of recruiting, which is sales. So it's a process, it's a funnel, it's a conversion rate, it's marketing, it's lead generation. So you have to have that mindset. You have to be curious. You also, I will say, the kiss of death on any interview for me is, people wanting to help people. I want to help people get jobs. I like working with people. And of course, I do. I love humans and want to do good in the world. But if you are trying to help everyone, you're going to crush your soul because you say no more than you say yes. So you have to also have this thick skin to be able to walk away. And I learned that early. I had a trainer who said, don't get a quest. And I remember early on, I had this woman, her name was Colleen, and I kept sending her on interviews because I liked her so much. And she was sad. And I couldn't fix that. And she kept saying, I couldn't make a placement because she wasn't presenting well, but she was so good and so smart, but she was sad. And so I learned early in my career that as much as I'd want to help the Colleens of the world, my job is to do what the business needs. And so that's the other key, is think of the business first. I've talked to a lot of recruiters or leaders that tend to think of their team or their goals or what they're doing. And I think for me, my success, and mostly in the recent, probably last 10 years, as I've grown into leadership roles, is because I try to think of the whole, or I do think of the whole business. I'm not thinking of what's the goal just of my team or me. It's what's best for the company. So I speak up and participate with ideas outside of what I do. And I think that you have to be a broader thinker and a strategic thinker.
I love
The
that.
last thing,
Oh, go
yeah, I
ahead.
just,
no,
for
keep
sure.
going.
yeah, the
Keep-
last thing I'd say is, in most recruiters, including me, go kicking and screaming to the data side. Um, I I can tell you the moment I found religion about data, and it was at Salesforce, and we were using CRM as our ATS at the time. But I didn't care. I just wanted to make placements, make hires, fill the roles, and every recruiter should want and love the insights they get from data. And when you walk into a room having data as to why, yes or no, context, whatever it is, you're immediately a trusted partner. And I think that's the missing link now that it took me a while to find. I still get beat up about data every day, so there's no magic. I don't know one leader that's not being asked for a different source of truth, and there's 5 different versions of the same thing, but so it never goes away. And if you want to become a leader in the field, you have to get really comfortable talking about it. And I've had a lot of ups and downs in that. So
What's interesting though, Sandy, is every leader, ops, finance, sales, marketing, they operate with data, and they get questions too. So the CMO gets hammered on data as well. We should expect it, and come to expect it. CHRO, heads of talent, we should expect that. But I love your idea that the path that you got to your religion around data. And again, it's hard because we didn't grow up a lot of folks in HR and TA didn't grow up with math. We didn't come from STEM.
Yeah.
So shocking, not shocking. I have an art history degree.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, as you look at your career again, your career is going to extend far beyond now. But as you look backwards, what was the toughest move that you made in your career that you think you made in your career? What was it? And why was it a tough move for you?
Well, I think deciding to move to California was a big deal. I was 32, so it's not as if I was just out of school and hey, then my life's ahead of me. I was, all my friends were settling down and I had my family and a strong community back east. So I took a leap. I worked for Hyperion Solutions. I was a contractor and they sent me out to California to help with an acquisition. I mean, back then too, they flew me out every 2 weeks. I was getting upgraded. It was amazing. I mean, I never had that. And I also never had free soda until I came to California. I didn't even know what that was to have, hoodies and jeans, back east were pretty buttoned up. So, that was a big leap because I was a contractor. I didn't know what was going to happen. And then of course, 2001 happened and, knock wood, I never went a day really unemployed during those times. And then after that, leaving Salesforce was really hard. I joined at 450 employees. It was just after the IPO and I left at 5,000 and it was such a great experience. I look back at it so fondly and the people I'm still connected to, but it was growing faster than I was, which I didn't realize at the time. I was very much like, why aren't I progressing further? And I was running engineering, recruiting, and product. I had a big piece of the company, but the company was definitely scaling faster than I was at that time. So that was really hard. And I took a job at, I'll just say Marketo, and they were 100 people and it was reporting directly to the CEO. And I was cocky and I thought I was growing faster than what Salesforce thought. And then I knew right away I'd made a mistake and I left in 6 months. I left and of course they went public, so shame on me. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to have the top job. And I learned then that you want people smarter than you in the room. And not that the people at Marketo weren't smarter than me, but they didn't know what I knew. And they didn't have a HR leader either at the time. So having everything come to me at that time in my career, I was not ready for.
You're the first person, before Andrew asks a question, you're the first person that's said that. That whole line of thought that, you know what, there's a progression. And I kind of tried to skip the progression, and I'm now at the place where all of it makes sense. And if I knew now what or if I knew then what I know now, you'd be fine. But you're the first person that's actually said that. So kudos to you.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously. So you said some really interesting and I think sage comments. One being, I loved your narrative. Was it Colleen? Because I've done that. Like I'm a big energy person, and I learned way too late I really liked it, and it wasn't a fit. And you end up first of all, it doesn't do any good. You think you're helping, but to your point, you're not. You're actually hurting, and it's not helpful. And sometimes no is God's. So good for you, because I think I think everybody at some point in time learns that. The other thing you said that I thought was very profound was, I like every man for themselves, but you can't be everybody's, right? It's not show fun, it's show business. It's a business. And then your comment about data, data doesn't lie. People lie, but data doesn't lie, clean data. So that's really good. I just want to make sure we dog ear that. Okay, so we talked about some of the things that, and I also love your comment about, hey, know your stuff. Like I'm never not amazed. The people that I know, like you, Sandi, that come up that are very successful, they've done it. Like it's a little bit of those who can do, those who can't talk about it, or maybe they administer. But you're right. because and I'm never not amazed when someone like an engineer, I mean, I'd love to maybe another podcast, but you have to eat the dog food because then you know what it tastes like, and then you can, and oh, by the way, then people really respect you and admire you because because you did it. You didn't just talk about it. I mean, do you want to go to war with the guy that wrote a book about it, or do you want to go to war with the guy that was in the foxhole? So good for you. So I just got flagged. Producer Bev has a question, and I'd like to acknowledge you, Producer Bev.
Thanks. You were talking about data and how you just went at it and embraced it immediately. I'm still amazed.
Once I embraced
it,
it was immediate. It took me a while to get there, but yeah.
Okay, well, good for you. I'm still surprised some of the things that data can tell you. It's like they know this, and I think if the average Joe knew how much data is collected. So I just wanted to ask you, what was the most surprising aspect of data that you discovered as you got yourself more and more soaked into it?
It's interesting. I don't know if surprising. I think just all the flavors, like there's the ratios of the funnel metrics is the most basic, but what people don't understand is then what's underneath it. So we could say, oh, it's 100 applicants to a hire, but then if it's 8 applicants to an on-site interview to a hire, that's a bad ratio. So, but that's not diagnosing the top of the funnel, that's diagnosing lower down in the funnel. So just all the insights that came out of the data were the most fascinating. Quit rates, where are we losing people?
That's like cart abandonment.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and even, now I want to measure quit rates of our diversity population, because if we're not presenting ourselves well, if people are saying, I don't want to work here, but we're not noticing it because it's just a normal attrition rate, then, we're not doing our job. So, and then, there's other insights just around how many offers are we making exceptions for that end up turning us down? Or how many people, especially during COVID, I'm doing analysis right now, and I'm looking at, we've had more offer turn downs in Q3 than the first half of the year. I'm finding from my peers, it's not that unusual. I'm talking to different companies, and a lot of them are staying where they are. And so it's all of those insights. So it's really the insights out of the data.
A quick follow-up to that, Sandy. Is it more or less like win-loss analysis? Are you analyzing, hey, we're past the point of you've already declined the offer. Now we just want to kind of find out, like, could we have done something different?
So we do a candidate survey that gives us that data.
Right.
So and I would say, Bev, actually on this is something that we started at LinkedIn that I've been evolving since at Optimizely and now here is having an NPS for, and candidates that receive offers, candidates that don't receive offers. And my goal, I'll never reach it, but is to get the number the same, right? I want every candidate, whether they accepted or were rejected, to have a high feeling of the interview with us. So that's where I get some of the analysis on why, because people get the survey after they've on-site interviewed. When I was working at my last company, their scores were amazing. And then I realized they were sending the survey after the first interview before there was an outcome.
Right.
Like, well, of course they love you. They want the job. So you have to do it after the outcome. So little things like that. Adding analysis, my last company, they had a 50-50 acceptance rate, which is super low, obviously. And I said, well, how are you making offers? Like, why are you making that many offers? They had no idea that you can approve to hire someone. There's a metric, but the actual offer to acceptance rate should be, you're not going to make an offer unless you're pretty sure they're going to say yes. So the offer acceptance rate should be about 90 plus. I mean, they thought I was a genius. I am not. Like, that's just.
It's because you've done the work.
That
goes back to 88 all the way till
right.
now.
It was kind of funny. Yeah, they're like, oh, it was game changing, but it just best, one little metric.
The best compliment you can give a recruiter as a candidate is you declined them and they say, I had a fantastic experience.
Absolutely. Or
right?
refer somebody.
Right. So I got a real quick piggyback, Andrew, and it's because we are talking about data and metrics. So right now, the metric that you're in love with and the one that you'd like to kill. So if you a magic wand time, here's your magic wand. So if you could get rid of a metric, even if it's just an industry buzzword, quality of hire or whatever, even if it's not something that you necessarily use, but we could just stop talking about it as an industry, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think quality of hire, we're not doing it, but I do think everyone asks for that and no one knows how to define it. So I would say that is one I don't want to measure or hear about. I mean, I love seeing just the simple goal to hire, or the overachieving. I like the basic number. That's why it makes me crazy with dirty data, because I want to say, don't you want to change the status to something good? It makes me so excited to go from offer to hired. Every day I have a weekly dashboard, and just looking at the numbers go up in the quarter. I wake up in the morning, I hit refresh, and it gives me joy. So I'm a little geeky that way. So that would be it. But yeah, the quality of hire, I think, is I think people are selling it. They're selling tools on, predictive analytics and then measure quality hire. And I'm not sold.
That is interesting. So one thing, just audience, to pause and just acknowledge, you've got to be amazed or impressed with the level and measure of strategy that goes into, because I don't think most people don't realize how enmeshed or involved or how deep you get into the data and the interviewing. Most people think it's like yes, no, that's it. They don't realize, oh my God, there's all screening in, screening out, quality of hire, time to fill. I mean, it's really it's a lot. And I'm never not amazed. And I think that's, again, a big point of the show, is to show people, oh my God. I mean, for you to say, oh yeah, I wake up and I look at my dashboard and I get off on that. I mean, that little thing, that audience should give you hope that someone is heavily invested in, So anyways, okay, so we talked a lot, and we need to pivot soon and go to the candidate side. And William, producer Bev, if you want to ask, but so what are some of the, we often ask, okay, what advice would you give your younger self? But I would even extend that to say, okay, we talked about some of the strengths or the assets or the things that you look to or that you believe are attributes of a successful TA leader or recruiter. What are some of the things that you think are no bueno, or that you think are not productive and that are actually a liability?
I mean, out for yourself, which we talked about. I think when a recruiter goes native to the business, that's not good. So I've seen several examples where they make decisions that aren't best for the company. It's more for their leader. And there's a lot of politics then come into play. I think if you're not curious and if you're not willing to just get on the phone, I mean, the kiss of death to me, and now in COVID, I can't see it, but at my last job, if you have a 3 email exchange, get up and go to the 4th floor and talk to the person. Slack gets you, if you have one question, great, but pick up the phone, call the people. So if I don't see a willingness to that and just a fearlessness about talking to anybody, then that would be a sign of somebody who's probably not going to thrive in the long run. You can process, but you're not going to be a great recruiter.
We used to call that call reluctance.
Yeah.
Back in the day, we would call it call reluctance. People wanted to do, especially as email started to become more, prevalent. People wanted to do everything digitally. They wanted to do the entire transaction digitally. It's like,
Makes me nuts.
it makes it. It makes me nuts. Made me nuts at the time. It makes me nuts now. The last question for me on your career side is, as you analyze your career, I want to ask a question about where you thrive. And it's like a petri dish, right? So it's your team, it's your peers, the leaders, it's
Yeah.
the company. Like, but give us some insight into where Sandi thrives.
It's peers, it's having a great boss, a leader. I love coaching, and coaching people that you can tell are growing, and not just because of me. Like, they're reading books, they're listening to podcasts, they're getting coaching from everyone. That gives me a lot of energy. But I some fun, and being in a company that's doing the right thing. I don't need them to have a product that I use personally. I don't need to work for a social media company or what have you, but something that the founders are passionate and committed, and they run by a certain set of values. I enjoy that as well. Like, you have a roadmap. And so it's really a combination, but I like the coaching. And I, like I said before, if I'm able to add value outside of recruiting, that gives me a ton of energy. And so the bigger the company, it's less. I don't think our CEO is going to call me about advice around, an acquisition. But when my last company was under 500 employees, I definitely got asked those questions. And so that gives me a lot of energy.
So just real quick, as a follow-up, people that wouldn't thrive with you would be people that either they're tired or they don't want to learn, or they've kind of hit that wall of not really reinvesting and kind of, moving their career along. Those would be folks that wouldn't thrive around you.
I mean, I want
Ish.
people ish. I think curiosity, you thrive.
Yeah.
Learning, if you're a learner, there's a big team. We have different skill sets, different.
Right.
But what I tell people is, I would rather slow you down than push you out. Right. So I
Oh,
want to
that's
be saying,
cool.
whoa, 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 easy, than saying,
That's
come
cool.
on, you can do it. That's where I get excited.
I think that speaks volumes. And I think not just for recruiting and life in general.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you said, and it was kind of along the lines of, well, actually, let me just, so are you a reader, Sandi?
Yep.
Okay, so have you read any of Ryan Holiday's books? The Obstacle is the Way.
I have to admit, I've gotten
Ego is the
away
enemy.
from business
It's
books
okay.
for like the past few years, but I'm a reader.
Okay, so, and I listen, this isn't, we did a whole thing on a podcast within, I forget, I guess it was Leanne, where we were, it's like, what book? It's like a trick question, like, nothing, I'm not. But anyways, I happen to be reading it, and he's a big, kind of what you said, but a different lens. And his whole thing was, hey, I don't want to have a meeting unless it's a meeting. Like, what are we meeting about? And if there's a way we can do it in email, and to your point, like just one or two, not five. And then he kind of says, and because that's my style, I don't want to pick up. And that was just him. He's an author. He's a mogul. He was Tim Ferriss, kind of like, so whatever. I get that. People are like that. But his comment was, hey, I have to adopt my style. If it's my publisher and he wants to talk, why then we're talking. So you kind of have to. But I agree with you, because I'm a pick up the phone person, probably to my own detriment. Okay, so we're at that point. We're over halfway through. We need to pivot and go to the candidate side. And I'm pretty excited to hear what you have to say, because you have to break a few eggs if you want to make an omelet. And I loved your comment about cheerleading like you're not Tony Robbins. And sadly, I think a lot of people are stuck or immobilized. They're either discouraged or frustrated. So what are some things that come to mind to you if I'm either new to the job market, or maybe I'm just stuck at my job and I don't really know? I mean, we always joke around being good at getting a job isn't something you want to be good at, but advocating for oneself is a skill. And sadly, it's not a skill that everyone has. So back to my question, what are some practical, actionable suggestions or feedback that you have for someone in that position?
And we're talking early in career.
Early in career, mid-career,
Okay.
anything. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to forget more about this in the next few
Yeah.
minutes.
I think early in career is different. I think, I coached my niece in her first jobs is you're going to get these questions, and most people don't interview well. They're only saying, they're going to see if they like you. So what you have to do is answer every question as if they've asked you a behavioral based question. So if they ask you a hypothetical, answer it with a real life experience. Because even if her job was at Starbucks, talk about customer engagement, customer satisfaction, whatever it may be. And so always tie, the less experience you have, the more important that is, because you have to find a real life example as to why. And I do prep people that most people are not interviewing for fit of the job. We live in a bubble out here, and everyone's probably over indexed in behavioral interviewing and how, making sure we have criteria and everybody meets the criteria, which is great. But in the scheme of, how many jobs and how many employers and how many people are interviewing, it's probably a small percentage doing it that way, but you should interview that way. And so that's my biggest piece of advice. Also do a lot of homework on the company. And I don't mean the product. Nobody asked me, do I think, cloud security architecture, what are my thoughts on it? But why do I want to work at Zscaler? And that was important. And I had a great answer. I did my research about, for me, I want to work for a company that means something and that is essential to businesses. That was my criteria. And so have an answer of why that company is important. And also the most basic is find somebody who can do an intro. That's, employer referrals have it's at least a 4 times higher rate of getting at least an interview, but hired. There's usually, and that, LinkedIn has made it easy with alumni networks, and just any kind of referral in is going to X, your chances up, multiply. So those would be my basic. And then the later in the career, I think the homework, the networking becomes more important, knowing who you're going to meet. And I do get I will tell you, if you're interviewing with me and you've done too much research and you come in really hard
A little
on,
stalkish, a little creepy.
yeah, I had a vendor who actually listened to there's a video of me on Smart Recruiters. I think they've taken it down. And I talked about Hamilton. So when I came on the vendor call, they had Hamilton playing in the background, and they just have no idea how much of a turnoff that was, because I love Hamilton, but that's not the context of which I want to see it. So it was that kind of stuff. So just do your homework in the smart way.
Right. Like it's almost following the conversation instead of assuming that you wanted to hear that. It's like, hey, saw a video of you where you were talking about Hamilton. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm really I can't wait. Like that's a different bit.
Totally fine, but playing, yeah. And I interviewed a senior director at this company, my company now, to be in our people and culture team. We didn't hire her, and I got on the phone and she said, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I was just so taken aback.
What do you mean, like this hour, or like my LinkedIn title, or are you asking kind of a metaphysical question? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't want to sound like, well, I run. I didn't know what to say, and I just thought saying, well, I'm the VP of talent.
You handled it better than I would have. I can already tell you that would have not gone well for that candidate. I got to ask you about the candidate that got away. So I won't say the fish that got away, but the candidate through your history.
There's a million.
Yeah, I know. We're thousands and thousands, right? So
I doubt that.
The one that you wish you had back. You wish that either the hiring manager would have made the right decision, or whatever. But there's a Jane or John out there where you're like, we would have just hired that person.
I'm gonna flip it only because there are a ton.
Sure.
There are a ton. There's and someone I'm personally close with, like even at Google and then into every company. I was like, this person is a rock star. But I had a candidate at Salesforce that I told the hiring manager no, because she was so difficult during the interview process. And it was, a female director of engineering, and the hiring manager insisted. And I was like, she is a nightmare. And we hired her, and she became my worst nightmare because she brought in all these agencies, and just ran rogue. And anyway, she was fired a year later by that leader.
So you were right.
I was totally right. It built my relationship with him, which became important in my career. So having that trust built changed the trajectory of my career too. It helped me at Salesforce. It helped me. So, stand your ground. And that would be advice I know back to recruiters, is offer your opinion. You're there as an interviewer. You are not there managing a process. If you've interviewed the person and you have a red flag, or you want to push the candidate, have a voice in the room. And that's what I look for. Do not be afraid. I get annoyed if I hear a recruiter say after, well, yeah, I didn't think they were going to work out. It's like, well, did you speak up? And so.
That's good.
But the ones who got away, there's a ton. There's just, people that.
Yeah, you want it alphabetically or by decade?
There's too many.
All right, producer Bev has another question.
Well, rolling back to sad Colleen, how did you ultimately break up with her?
I don't remember. This was like probably 1989, so I don't remember. But I wish her well. I used to remember her last name, and I have to say that's escaped me. But I just hope. I think we did have a little bit of a talk. Someone told me a long time ago, the truth is never mean, and you can be mean how you deliver the truth.
That's a great thought.
Yeah. So I am sure. I just said, when I have something, I'll call you. I learned early on, you make the tough calls first in the day. So
yeah,
she would have been
the Band-Aid.
Yeah, you rip off the Band-Aid. But I don't remember. But I sent her on 6 interviews, that I remember.
Well, and I think that speaks to something you said earlier, which I admire you for, and that is your transparency and your, this is it, this is how it is, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's this way. Like you said, the truth is never mean. But I want to go back to something you said, because I think it's very important and very relevant to what we're talking about, and that is the counsel you gave your niece, did you say? And that is, like, you're right, people aren't good at interviewing. And if you're going to rely on the interviewer's questions, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So you know far more about interviewing than I do, Sandy, but the STAR thing, situation to action result, that, so listeners, viewers, don't rely on the interviewer. It's if haven't, God, you get to that stage, by God, whatever you did, make it, like Sandy said, make it anecdotal. Give an example of how you solved a problem specifically and what your role and part in it was, because that's your time, that's your chance. And don't have Hamilton playing in the background. That's all right, so
I got a quick question.
Go ahead, William.
Sure. It's twofold, Sandy. It's one where you've been on the candidate side and one where you've seen the candidate, and it's your funniest story. So it can be where, and again, you're going to do it both sides. So when you've been a candidate, like where you've made a mistake, my bad, and/or where you've had a funny candidate story as well. And we're anonymizing. We're anonymizing this.
So the candidate stories, well, there's a bunch, but I thought of it was my first inside job. It was a company in the East Coast, and it was a hardware company. And this guy came in, and he was chewing gum. And I was very nice about it. I was like,
mouth open, mouth closed.
Yeah, he was total. He was chewing gum. He was probably 25 years old, which I was probably 25 at the time too. And he's chewing gum. And I said, throw out the gum before you meet the team. He was meeting me first. And so great. Fast forward, that was probably 1999. I met Hyperion. Actually, I think it was Pitney Bowes. I worked at Pitney Bowes for about 6 months. And I'm interviewing someone who's chewing gum, and it's the same guy. And I just thought, and I didn't know in the beginning, who he was, but he's chewing gum and it just sparks. And I just handed him the trash, like a mother, like throw out your gum. So that was one. I don't know, for me, I missed an interview. I was scheduled to interview with a company, and I just thought we rescheduled the whole day for another day, but it was just part of the day. And they called me. They're like, "Where are you?" I went in and bombed. I'll tell you, it was actually Mozilla, and I told them I used Firefox or whatever wasn't their product. So that was stupid. So I wasn't going to get that job ever. They actually sent me. This was bad candidate experience. I interviewed on site and I met like heads of every department, and they sent me a rejection email, not called me. Because my rule is if someone's come on site, you get a phone call.
Nice.
That's a great rule.
Yeah, so that was a bad, but I definitely should not have gotten that offer. And then fast forward to about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I had a recruiter call me for a job there, the head of talent. And I said, this must be, I know you're just going through LinkedIn. I don't respond to everybody, but I responded to her and I was like, I am sure if you look in the ATS, it's do not hire.
Nice.
A big giant
Good for you.
scratch through. Never. But
Never.
You know what? When you miss the appointment, you're pedaling uphill at that point.
Yeah. And I didn't, I clearly did not.
Yeah.
I wasn't passionate about the job. It wasn't something I was upset about, but I certainly didn't want to show up like that. And then I had another one where they said I was too shy. And so the next time, and I'm actually a little introverted, but the next time I went all in and I didn't shut up for a half hour. So that didn't go well either. So you never know.
So we talked a lot about the do's, and one of the things we talk about on the show a lot, Sandi, is feedback. And I think feedback is super important, particularly if it's well-intentioned and truthful, to your point. What are your thoughts on feedback, and what if it's not solicited or it's unsolicited? I mean, where do you stand on feedback?
Always give the feedback. So when we call a candidate to reject them, they're going to ask why. And they're always going to ask, which is a little disingenuous, well, so I can prep for my new interviews. Basically, they just want to know why you're rejecting me. You should tell them. I mean, there are times where it's a little too personal or maybe hurtful. And there I usually say, there's two candidates, you pick one. So I tend to fluff it up a bit, but 90% of the time there's something in there you can tell them that will help, and they're very grateful for it. Why didn't I get the job? What was I lacking? And I just, it's human. It's just being a good person is giving feedback. And so we get a lot of great feedback for doing that. We're scaling fast now. I would say, probably it's something we have to drill into a little harder, but it is a big piece of my DNA to do it. And so,
well, you said it earlier with trust isn't mean, which is genius, by the way. A great tattoo if anyone's looking to get some body art. I love your call to on-site rule. I haven't heard that before. That's actually new for me. So thank you for that. That's actually a really, really good nugget that I'll carry with me.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
When we do the surveys, we had somebody say, and I had a great recruiter at Optimizely, was so enthusiastic. He really was so engaging with the candidates. But this person wrote in the feedback, I knew from the call before I was rejected that his tone had changed and I was not going to get the job, even though we were keeping them warm. So you had asked Bev around, data. Well, that data said, one, to give to the recruiter to say, he didn't even know he was doing it. So that was just a click. He was never going to do that again. But 2, it was data to go back to the business and say, we're waiting too long. If neutral is no. If you're
Right.
not sure about someone, we need to cut them loose now. So it shortened our time in status as
Oh,
well
that's cool.
by doing that. So it just kind of ties all into.
Well, it forces everybody to make a decision. Like,
Right.
let's make a decision here.
Right.
Let's not keep anybody in limbo. So, and this is for HR and recruiting specifically. The best question you've ever been asked from a candidate?
Oh, can I give you the best question I ever got asked by another recruiter that I now?
Well,
see all
yes,
the
of course
time?
you can.
Okay.
Sandy, there are no rules.
I can't off the top of my head, I think there's probably nothing unique. I think the best question is something that is authentic and that they're very curious about. But I had a headhunter ask me this, and I use it now all the time, is when you're hiring a candidate, and mostly with high level, and he asked, is there something about this candidate that if this blows up in a year, you're going to point to that why it didn't work out? Right?
I like
That's
that.
great.
It's such a great question. And this person we hired blew up in a year, and we could point to the 5 things that we chose to ignore at that time, and it didn't work out. And that was exactly why. And I thought for a guy who's going to get a fee, it was a very bold, confident question to ask the business on this search.
Smart. That
Super
enables
smart.
that trust.
That is good.
That
One
was
of the
Best
ones,
question.
Sandy, Bev, William, maybe you remember, the guy said, hey, back to the feedback, by the way, I want to acknowledge you. That's so cool, because you're right. Again, no one wants to hear no, and you're not doing anybody a favor by not telling it, particularly to your point, if there's an opportunity for them to improve the next time around, or learn and grow. And it's not really what you say, it's how you say it. So good for you. But the one was, is there any reason why after this interview you wouldn't hire me, from the candidate to the recruiter? I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, that's because then it's talk about economy of scale, right?
That's
Yeah.
sales. So when
It's
you said
sales,
it,
yeah.
we actually had a cool conversation. It's the candidate gets up, and there, before the candidate was walking out, the candidate returned and just said, okay, is there anything that's come up in our conversation today? This is sales. And so the candidate was in sales mode. Like, I want to identify if there's something I've said, or if there's something that's already, let's talk through it. Let me make sure that you have the full story so that you can make a great decision. Genius.
I think it works for sales, especially.
Yep.
I think, yeah.
Producer Bev has just let me know that was Cadigan that said that. So
Oh,
duly noted, Steve Cadigan. We're waiting for the book to come out. Okay, so all right. Well, we're running out of time. We kind of already did the funny HR story thing, so you're safe there. I always like to close with so audience is never going to get to see you or hear you again. Is there any kind of, what are the 1 or 2 key takeaways? I mean, you touched on a lot, and I know I'm asking a lot. I mean, the feedback, the networking, the get referred in, have your story straight, star interviewing, but any kind of overarching, hey, if nothing else, do this, or if nothing else, don't do this.
Don't you come.
don't you come. I
We
think,
got that. No Hamilton, no chewing gum.
well, listen, everyone should listen to Hamilton. That's a no-brainer.
Right.
But I think what I would say is answer the questions as if you've been asked a behavioral question. And I also think if you're interviewing, if you're the recruiter, the first answer someone gives you is the least important you will ever get. So it's, what's the next 10 words underneath? What's the questions after that? What are the follow-ups? That's where you get the actual insight and experience. But if you ask one question and you get one answer, it's almost worthless. So it's the follow-ups afterwards. And that, I think, on both sides, is when somebody, I will say, if a candidate has no questions, I know it's a little cliche, but it's true. If you come to me, especially when you're meeting me at the final round for my team and you have nothing to ask me, I'm not as impressed. So I think, have some great questions, but the follow-ups is what I look at too. And then we start having a conversation and I become more interested in you. So I think it's the following up, attention to detail,
That's a good
and
point too.
curiosity
Touch on that.
just through the whole
Curiosity, what I
thing.
always get. Do you have a knockout question? Like, what's your favorite superhero or
Oh.
anything?
I mean,
well, no, but
That means you do.
yeah.
You just
no, I
wanted to
really
tell.
don't.
Come on now.
I'm not a fan of the. I'm not a fan of the questions, and maybe this is controversial, but we used to work with somebody who'd say, are you lucky or are you smart or people, how many balloons fit in an airplane? And I think those questions, what you want them to say,
Yeah.
and
Right.
set up that it's 50-50 that you're going to end up rejected because you didn't answer to what's in your head about that question. So I like to get to know somebody, like tell me, especially with COVID, how are you? How's your family? Are you okay? Like we just start up in a warm way. I don't want to be inhuman, but I don't like those.
I hope we keep that post-COVID, by the way, that empathy, because you're talking about it drips, the calls drip with empathy at the beginning. It's how you doing? How's your family?
Yep.
At the end, it's, social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands. There's
Yeah.
a lot of empathy in there. My question for years was, we're all misunderstood. How are you misunderstood? Because I really just is a puzzle. I wanted to see how they unraveled the puzzle and how they played that. I wasn't really looking for it. There is no right answer. I just wanted to kind of see how they dealt with and what they highlighted. And again,
if they didn't highlight something you thought was good, was it a wrong answer then?
Not at all. It was the probative. You nailed it. It was the stuff underneath that became the fun part of the conversation.
Yeah.
You said it, Sandy. I was at the show, you guys, or maybe it was just someone I was talking. It was someone. It was John Walsh, producer Bev. His favorite one. What's your favorite television show? Because then they'd say, "Oh," and he goes, "I forget what he said. It was. Is it not? I don't even can't remember the name of the show." And he said, "Oh, if they said 9 feet under or whatever it was, they're not. That was not a fit. We're not. Let's just stop the bleeding." I thought that was pretty clever, but to your point, Sandy, it kind of is like, okay, let's talk about it. Maybe it's MASH or whatever, and then it's a conversation instead of who's buried in Grant's tomb or whatever.
Right. But it's also like, and I don't mean about you asking me about books, that I really don't. But if someone's like, well, what are you reading? Like, I throw out, it's one of my favorite books. I'll throw out like Age of Innocence because I know it's sort of a classic, but
nice.
But I'm not reading it right now, but I'm not going to tell them what I'm reading.
That's a good one. What's your favorite book is better than, that's actually a really good.
But my point in that is most people are probably reading, like, I mean, I did just download Andrew McCartney's, Brat book about the Brat, I'm from the 80s and I'm interested in the Brat Pack, but I'm probably not going to tell that to a CEO in an interview who asks me what I'm reading. So I'm going to say Age of Innocence or $1 Trillion Coach, which I love that book too, but I'm not reading it now. I'm reading, fluff. So that's why those questions always make me I feel like they put people on the spot.
Cringy.
Yeah.
And if my guilty pleasure is The Real Housewives, which it is, I don't know if I'm going to disclose that on an interview.
Right.
And say, oh, well, it's 60 Minutes, of course.
Yeah.
That's where those questions, that's why I'm not a fan, frankly.
But you know what, that comes out in conversation, and to your point, like you're just talking about people, and it's like, how do you like to spend your extra time when you're not working? Like, what do you like to do? What is your guilty pleasure? And it's not judgmental. It's just you're curious. You're curious, and they're curious about you.
Yeah, I think that's fine. But yeah, that's why I'm always.
That's just super. It's really
Great
interesting
job.
and provocative. Brene Brown says vulnerability is the first thing we want from other people, and it's the last thing we're able to give. And right, wrong, or indifferent, a lot of times people come into an interview and they're not showing up as their authentic self. They're nervous. They're worried. Do you like me? Am I wearing the right outfit? Is it cool? And did I say the right book? It's just what you said. And if it's a canned question, you're going to get a canned answer. And then it's like, anyways. Okay. So, Sandy, we've only got 12 million subscribers. So how can people get in touch with you or, if they want to reach out to you, what's the
Yeah,
best
I
way
would
to
say
do it?
LinkedIn's probably the best bet. I don't tweet anymore really, so I'm not really on Twitter, but I would say LinkedIn is, come join. We're doing a webinar on Tuesday, and so you'll see stuff that we're doing on our side, and yeah, follow me on LinkedIn.
Right on. Hey, I really want to thank you for taking the
Guys, this
time
was
out of your
fun.
busy day. Well, it was fun. It was informative. I feel like I know you better. I know you added a ton of value to the listeners and the viewers. I know William and Bev had a good time.
You
Okay.
can stop recording.
Thanks,
Well,
everybody. We'll see you next
send
week.
any
Oh, yeah.
questions.
Like and
Send any questions
subscribe.
to
Ask
ask
questions. Yeah, feedback. Please.
Ask Tincup and Gardiner.
Thank you, Bev.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, you guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.